Hey guys, it's your course director Emily Ray here. Just wanted to give you some positive, productive feedback on these visual resumes that you turned in. So this shouldn't have been the first time that you've been, laying out your resume content. The ask was that you make it a little bit more visual in this case. Before we get started, I'm going to go through each one of the submissions one by one and point out a few areas that you should consider tweaking moving forward. But just a couple of things as quick reminders. One, what we're looking for with your resume is the establishment of a clear connection between the skills and experiences you've listed and the types of jobs that you want to get in the media communications industry. So what that means is that if you want to be a graphic designer, then you should show relevant experience for a graphic designer on your resume. Likewise, if you want to get into social media, the positions that you're listing ideally would show that kind of experience. If you don't have that kind of experience, ask yourself, how can I build those skills and or experience before I graduate? Now that could be difficult since you guys are in Port 6 and nearing the end of the program. So maybe that means volunteering for an organization. Maybe that means an internship. Maybe that means coming up with one of your own projects. There are a lot of different answers to that question. So depending upon your unique circumstances, there could be an option in there for you. And then, one of the other things is, what are you saying about your accomplishments in a position and not just your responsibilities? So every job, there are certain tasks or duties that one must perform as part of that job. But what did you do and how did you do it in a way that only you could? What was the unique value that you brought to that position? And if there's any way that you can phrase that, that would be a thoughtful way of showing how you contributed value in that area. Spell check, spell check, spell check. Most of the programs that you can use to design a resume, even things such as Photoshop or Illustrator, have a spell check feature. But spell check's not going to find misused words. So I've had several students use the word customer service, or at least that's what they thought they were using, but they spelled it costumer. And so that's not something that spell check is going to catch. So you need some trusted human eyes on your resume, someone who's going to go over it with you point by point and just make sure that it is in fact communicating what you want it to do. And you want to keep adding to this, right? So it's a living, breathing document and should be, basically the snapshot of your skills and experience at this point in time. 2 years from now, it's going to look different. 6 months from now, it's going to look different. So you need to keep this in a place that it's easy and flexible enough to make those updates. And then last but not least, Wendy Walzer is our career development advisor for MCBS, and she's fantastic. Most of you will already be working with her at this point in the MCBS program, so close to graduation. But if you haven't reached out yet or you haven't been able to connect, go ahead and email her. I've included that address right here. And she would be a trusted source to go over this resume with you and kind of get it to the place that it needs to be in order to start applying for the jobs that you want. So we're going to take a look here at Angels. I'm looking that you have streamlined your content or your resume skills and experience down to a single page. A couple of things stand out to me. One is that your name is not capitalized, but then you use small caps here. It's a stylistic discrepancy, and I'm wondering if that's purposeful or not. Scrolling down, we can see you held a number of positions here in the Army, right? So this is a good long bit of experience. But can you tell me a little bit more about what you did in each of these roles? What kind of photography? What kind of video? Is this the editing included as well? What are you doing with social media? And because you are saying that you have highly visual pieces of work, it would stand to reason that you would also include a portfolio. So on all of your resumes here, a portfolio is a great asset to turn people onto so that you can actually show, what it is that you can do, not just tell people, but actually show them. There's some a little bit of weirdness here where this bullet is wrapping down to this line. It needs to be aligned in this space. Scrolling down, I could see that you've included a lot of keywords here. Really, the opportunity at this point would be for you to fill this section out a little bit more. Tell us, about each of these positions and what you did there. You have a lot of available space over here, so potentially could add some various other design elements. One other thing is I don't see anything related to social media. I don't know if that's purposeful or just an oversight, but something I wanted to mention. This is a great place to be, but definitely more would need to be added to this before you submitted it for a job. Next up, we're going to take a look at Garrett's here. And so what we see is, kind of a very blue, and it's almost looking like a 2-column layout here. We've got the contact information right up there at the top, which is great, and skills and tools. There is a little bit of sort of visual incongruity with having things aligned both left and aligned to the right over here. You've created this big hole, like this is high value real estate area on your resume, meaning it's literally front and center, but there's no content here, so you're not really taking advantage of this. One thing that you're not observing is a lot of a margin over here and up at the top and over here. I'd bring all your content in just a little bit, maybe if this was 1/2 inch, let's say move it in 1 inch on all directions, and then all of your text needs to be left aligned. Now, if you recall your editing for the web training, people tend to scan things in an F-shaped pattern. So if you recall, an F shape has this long vertical column over here. And the reason why that's a more usable layout for us is that in English, when we're reading from left to right, our eyes are going to wrap around to a consistent starting point each time, which makes it easier to absorb this information in a quicker way. With things that are aligned right, our eyes come back to a different starting point each time it wraps. So, just remember back to what you learned in editing for the web. Scrolling down, so here we have the experience, and these are the positions that you've held, which are great. But how far this, your duties and responsibilities are, there's not enough proximity between these elements, meaning they're too far apart for me to believe that they're related, right? If I take the time to read everything, okay, then I can kind of start to associate these in that way. But just by your design choice of moving this content closer to the experience here, you're visually associating those two bits. There's some great content here. You list, I would say these are keywords, or they're sort of the buzzwords, but you don't really explain what this means, what kind of content creation, what does marketing strategy mean, and who are you doing it for? So there's an opportunity for you guys to put more explanation in here so someone can get more of a full idea of what your skills and abilities are and how you might be able to contribute to their organization. So here we're taking a look at Eric's. I'm very familiar with your work, obviously, Eric, because we've worked together on a number of different portfolios. So I know that there is so much in terms of, work history that you can add here. And you've done it in a way that is both visual and on brand, and in kind of keeping, with the styles, color palette, topography that you've established all along. It looks fantastic. The only thing that I would, perhaps suggest is some sort of, you're associating introduction with this block of text, skills with this block of text, but maybe something that just delineates between these sections, right? So something that gives us a little bit of a visual that says, this section stops here. This section stops here, just in case someone's eyes aren't flowing exactly. And I don't know what that is. Maybe it's a horizontal rule across the page. Maybe experiment with it. Maybe it's a light gray, maybe dotted line, a small dotted line. I'm not sure. And it looks great. I don't know if maybe you had considered that, but perhaps thought, you're this kind of small text. So maybe if you had added that in, perhaps it would have to push things a little bit too far down on the page. Just something to think about. I'm seeing a couple of different font sizes here, so this looks a little bit bigger and bolder than this area here, so just double check that. This kind of looks like this blue color, whereas this looks black and this looks a little bit maybe lighter gray. I don't know if that's just a trick on the eyes because it's maybe seems a little less in terms of the weight, but just something for you to check for consistency. Overall, this is fantastic, and I think that this is something that one could point to as a successful visual resume that has both the depth of content but also staying on brand with how you've been establishing yourself as a professional throughout the program. All right, so here we have CJ, and a couple of things jumped out about this. Like, one is that it's highly stylized, and there's definitely an aesthetic, which I enjoy. The color palette is neat as well, but a couple of things jumped out. One was that you're using this typography or this combination of fonts, but then we have kind of an alternate identity or an alternate logo down here. It even has a different color scheme associated with it. So this for me is sort of a disconnect, right? So it's something that just shouts, wait a second, I don't fit in with the rest of what I see here. So something for you to think about. Kind of scanning through, I see just a couple of discrepancies in style, or so for example, why is photo editing both capitalized, but social media outreach only social is capitalized? So just being consistent with your capitalization conventions. Here, I would probably go ahead and move it so that the website address is associated up here and not dropping down to that next line. What was the other thing? There are a few areas where I see, so here, it's supposed to say and social media, but it says ands. So just a bit more attention to detail paid there. And last but not least, I might recommend you go ahead and add your contact information maybe up here and associate it in this section so that it's pretty close to your name right up here at the top. It's very interesting, the color palette and just the overall look, but I would examine what this section, what this is doing and how it's sort of distracting from the other, styles that you've established there. Next up, we have Christopher. And so a couple of things, and this is sort of similar to the feedback that I just gave CJ, and that is we're using this combination of typography, right? So it's sans serif, which is somewhat casual, approachable, but then we have this other identity over here that is a serif font, and then, it looks way more formal. And so these two identities don't match to me. This is a little bit more casual, accessible, and this looks a little bit more elegant, formal. And so I would say, which one of these is it? This is kind of like a charcoal color and not exactly black. And I'm wondering, is that purposeful, or is that just so that it sticks out on this black background? The black background and the white text, there's enough color contrast there, but you see it becomes a little bit problematic with the jet blue logo, because the blue on the black just doesn't quite pop as much. And so then you run the risk of people not being able to see it as well. The T. Reed and Company, this logo itself doesn't have any padding or margin space around it with the white, and so it looks very much stuffed into that white box. If I were you, I'd take it into Photoshop and I'd expand that canvas by about 20 pixels all the way around to give it a little bit of breathing room in there. And maybe that's something you want to do with the jet blue, go ahead and put that on a white background, within a white canvas or a white box, so that's popping off the page. Because one thing that you're going to see is then we have this logo on the white, and it's going to pop way more than the rest of your logos, and then that's going to have its own discrepancy in style and impact, right? Let's see, scrolling back up here, one thing I wanted to note is I would align education and employment on the same line up here, so not have it kind of stagger down. That would give us a bit more structure and alignment on the page. And then last but not least, all this information is bold, right? And so bold is a style that is applied to add emphasis to a certain amount of text, or like one point that you want to draw your eye to. If you've used it for all of these in all of these instances, it loses its impact. It no longer stands out because it's all there. So if everything is bold, nothing is bold in this case. So I would use that a bit more sparingly. Content is great. Structurally, it's really close to being there, but aesthetically, there's a little bit of like, where is this brand? Who is Christopher? Is Christopher more refined? There is more sophistication in what we see here, or is Christopher approachable and conversational, which is the vibe that I'm getting from this. Overall, you guys, this is a great start for this more visual version of your resume. You will definitely be revisiting this again in your Portfolio 7 class with course director Kevin de la Serna. He'll be working with you on getting this to its next best place, and to be something that you could actually submit for a job. So go ahead and make these changes. I'm happy to take a look at anything you guys update or answer any additional questions that you have about the feedback.